Thaboxingvoice.com.
What broke him down? Was it just
I
the
was body punching. I was hitting him with body punching. I heard him actually, he was crying in there.
You're saying that Biggs was crying when you hit him?
Yes.
When did that happen?
And perhaps the fourth round on.
Thaboxingvoice.com.
So that you knew you had him by that
Absolutely,
time.
but I knew he was tough and he was taking those punches.
DIAZ Productions.
What is up, TBV extended family? You know, this is like the TBV cousins, mixed combat radio, where we discuss MMA and everything other than boxing for combat sports. I'm joined today by the special friend of mine, good brother, good also co-host of TBV and fellow fan of MMA and former trainee of MMA, Mr. Doomsday Lions, Diamond Glove boxing amateur champion. What is that, Mr. Doomy? I do not have your intro here. I need to get Ness to send me that intro because it is dope. With the Mike Tyson shit, and you're on mute still. I mean, come on, man. Come on. I mean, it is one of the best intros in the game, period.
No sweat, Maddie. We're back at it right here with the sister channel, MCR. That's Mixed Combat Radio for you guys that are just tuning in. And
MCR podcast. Yes.
And Maddie mentioned before, I am I trained MMA for a minute, big gym rat. I love the sport as well as boxing. And Maddie called me up and said, "Hey man, we got these topics to talk about, and they're pretty fucking crazy topics in my end." And Matt's pretty much more in the loop nowadays more than me in MMA. I'm getting back into the loop. A lot of new fighters and stuff like that. But I'm glad to be a guest on the show today, Matt, and get into these topics that you've presented us with.
I mean, yeah, we do have a ton of topics, mainly because this is like a bi-weekly show, like a once a month show podcast. I want to do more. We are trying to set a one show per week time. We're going to have a consistent time per week, a consistent day. Where we're going to bring MMA news and topics and discussion for you, the fans, the listeners. And that will be coming soon. I promise you. We're discussing behind the scenes, trying to get some graphic arts design as well. So it should be lit. It should be lit soon. I promise you. But that day is not yet. But we're going to discuss a ton of topics. Obviously, we have Nate Diaz return, Stipe versus Daniel Cormier super fight, and also coaching the Ultimate Fighter. Ronda Rousey making the WWE appearance, official debut, if you want to call it that. And then plus, obviously, we have Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov being announced, being official again, and being up for the real belt according to Dana White. Even though Conor McGregor is not stripped, obviously we're gonna get into it. Obviously we're gonna delve into all the topics. But first on the docket, my man from the West Coast, from Stockton 209, motherfucker. It is Nate Diaz's comeback. I mean, I'm hyped, man. And let's be honest, when Nate Diaz says something on social media like he's coming back, we tend to believe him. He's not one to lie about that on social media. So when he says he's coming back, I believe him. Do you believe him, Jimmy? Do you believe we're going to see the comeback of Stockton's own?
I never took Nate for, just talking just to talk kind of guy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to agree with you 100%. If he's saying he's coming back, he's coming back. These two brothers, including his brother, and because they're known for a reputation of being stand-up guys, basically. We say we're gonna fight you, so I'm excited. We're all excited. This guy brings a lot of action, a lot of color, you know what I mean, to the sport. So yeah, I'm looking forward to him banging out.
I mean, obviously we're gonna talk about specific fights he could be in, but let's be honest here. Nate Diaz could headline a pay-per-view in a non-title fight by himself at this point. And what, 300,000 pay-per-view buys?
I don't know. You know what? I'm not saying that Nate Diaz isn't a brand. The hell he is. You know what I mean? A lot of people know who Nate Diaz is, even the casuals of the sport. But I don't know if he would garner that much with just a mediocre opponent. I think he still needs the right opponent. They still want him to be that bad guy for that, up and coming or set champion, whoever it may be, who has the belt. Conor McGregor's belt is pretty much flying around, right?
I mean, well, obviously, Tony Ferguson has the interim belt, technically. Conor McGregor has the official belt the last time I checked. Tomorrow, it may be different. A week from now, it may be different. We have no idea. We have really no idea what's going to happen with the lightweight division and the top of that division. But like you said, Nate Diaz, he can do that with, not a mediocre name. And let's delve into it. What are some names that pique your interest or maybe the casual fan's interest? I mean, two names that have thrown their name into the hat, so to speak, are Eddie Alvarez and Kevin Lee.
Eddie Alvarez and Kevin Lee is the names, right? Eddie Alvarez is coming off a win, all right, and Kevin Lee's coming off a loss. So I don't know where that would put either fighter in the ladder for that.
Yeah, if that determines who's going to get it over the other in this case. And again, Nate Diaz is coming off a loss himself, but then again, does it matter?
Well, he's that type of guy that, like we were talking about in the Boxing Voice channel, that we had Canelo kind of like, he's already his brand. He doesn't need the belt. He doesn't need once DSG, he doesn't really need a belt. So it's like, is Nate Diaz that brand already? I mean, a lot of people could have opinions on it. I believe he's branded himself, but he's that bad guy that needs that other like big name in order for him to function. I think him, pouncing on like and if he's not pouncing on a top 5 guy, I probably won't want to see him. So let's keep him up there with the top 5 guys, right?
Do you think Kevin Lee or Eddie Alvarez can talk enough shit back to create that sort of atmosphere?
Well, Kevin Lee is fresh. He's obviously fresher than Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez has been in a lot of war. Then again, Nate Diaz has been in a lot of war. So who do you give the chance to, the old lion or the new lion? Who knows?
I mean, when you're the promoter in this stance, you are thinking about, hey, maybe Nate Diaz doesn't win this fight. Then you have to sort of hope that the winner gets some sort of star cachet from Nate Diaz's name and his brand. If you think Kevin Lee is that next guy, then maybe you put Kevin Lee in the spot. If you don't think Kevin Lee is the guy and you think maybe Eddie Alvarez can somehow come back into the title spot and be a champion, then you give it to Eddie Alvarez. I think another thing we have to think about here is that the UFC, in my opinion, is not a fan of all 3 of these guys.
Nate,
Kevin, and Alvarez. In my opinion, I don't think they're big. I don't think the UFC or Dana White specifically is a big fan of either. Or
I can see why you would have that opinion. I can see Nate's had his share of issues. I don't know if what's the other guy you just mentioned? Kevin Lee. He had that beef at that press conference, right? That's the only time I've really seen him out of character.
True.
I don't know. I'm not gonna understand Nate. And what's the other guy?
Alvarez.
Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez has always had a pretty okay relationship, right? He's always done.
I've always heard stories behind the scenes that him and Dana have beefed and they butted heads.
I think all these fighters have beefed with Dana at one point or another because it's just always something about asking for a plug into a card or a fight or whatever it may be. So I could see that happening. Now with the new owners of the UFC, I don't think that they have to even like really go so much as through Dana. Dana has his position as the face and president. Am I not right in saying that?
Yeah, I'll put it this way: Dana definitely does not tend to the day-and-day operations of the.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much after the buyout, he's been alleviated of a couple of things.
But let's all still be real that Dana White is still a bigger figure than a lot of these guys were mentioning. Dana White,
almost definitely. Dana White is like, he's branded to UFC. Like they go hand in hand.
I'm not the direct comparison, but in terms of recognition, he's the Don King to MMA. Like everyone knows of Don King in boxing, regardless of the controversy. Just saying the recognition.
Oh yeah, biggest promoter, and probably one of the few. Because I know a couple other smaller cards that I might know, like as far as promotions. Promoters for a promotion, but Dana White is the biggest promoter for MMA I've ever. His name is everywhere. And
you can make the argument he's the biggest promoter in all of combat sports today, or at least the last 10 years. You can definitely say that.
Yeah, he did MMA and boxing, so he can get that,
Yeah, especially this last year he did boxing, that's for sure.
I guess we could turn the card around with Mayweather Promotions too, right? They did MMA and boxing, so yeah.
Another thing is that this fight, in my opinion, has to be a main event. There's no way you put Nate Diaz on the undercard and make it a 3-round fight, right?
No.
Okay, all right. So we agree on that. in my opinion, because of Nate Diaz's persona character, I think it's very hard to put him on Fox, to be honest. And deserving of a Fox headline. I know he has done in the past, and he's garnered huge numbers. 3+ million viewers on Fox. I understand that, but I still think these new owners may be a little more concerned about that, putting a guy that's going to throw the F-bomb out there in the podcast.
I mean, who are you gonna put him out there with, right? It depends, because Nate's been known to be a gentleman too. I mean, if anything, out of the two brothers, his big bro is probably the loose cannon per se kind of thing. He's probably a little more wilder. Let's just put it out there like that. But Nate can get out of hand. But I think that he knows the position he's in, right? He knows the position he's in right now, and I'm pretty sure that he's not going to drop the F-bomb. I mean, he's getting what he wants if he's getting a fight that he wants. Because Nate's at the point where, like, oh, give me the big fight. Oh, I want a good fight. And I don't know if he's just using this as a tune-up back fight. I mean, for another fight. I don't know how he's feeling these nowadays, you know what I mean? Because he's been in hella wars.
I know we haven't talked about it yet, but we have to, because I know the rumor's been out there, because Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov is made. There has been speculation that now this opens up the route for the trilogy fight, McGregor versus Nate Diaz. Does that happen? Or is that the most likely thing to happen? Probably the better question. And
I think
should it happen?
Man, McGregor returns, right? Like, McGregor returns and he fights Nate Diaz. I mean, I'm pretty sure McGregor is freaking looking for huge fights too. So has he put Nate Diaz in his rearview mirror? Sometimes he speaks that way. You know what I mean? McGregor, pounds his chest and walks up high, talking about he wants the money fights.
But two of the biggest pay-per-views of all time are those two McGregor Diaz fights. Those are two of the top 3 pay-per-view buy rates of all time for the UFC.
I mean, if you wanted to match McGregor up with anybody else in that division, I guess that matchup would be, I guess, something that would make sense, right?
Yeah.
The blood is there, bad blood, and
You don't sound like you want it, Doom. You sound like you're kind of like
you know what it is? It's like I gotta see how McGregor bounces back from this loss in boxing, and I gotta see how Nate Diaz comes back. Period. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if I want to if these guys are really going to match up right off the bat. They're not going to fight each other coming in.
You want the trilogy fight, the final fight between them, so to speak, to be this one at this time. I can understand the timing being off in that aspect. Like, from an athletic standpoint, neither guy probably can be their best.
Yeah, I want these guys at their best facing each other, so then there's no excuses like, oh, I didn't even get a training camp. Oh, I had to make weight. I was off for a while. I had to shake off the cobwebs. There's always something. So I like to see these guys at their best. Nate coming back, taking on an Eddie Alvarez fight. Eddie Alvarez is a tough guy. They're both dogs, so there's going to be an entertaining fight. I'd watch that. Kevin Lee's good, man.
He is. And he can talk some shit, man.
Yeah, he talks shit and he's good. So that would be a fucking dope fight too. I could imagine these two guys getting at each other. You know what I'm saying? I know the crowd love it. I think that Kevin Lee's a more dangerous fight.
I can see that. I think he's the more explosive fighter than Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah.
I think he's probably the more dynamic wrestler as well.
Quick grappler too. Quick.
All of them are dangerous though for Nate Diaz. Like, if this is a tune-up fight, none of the guys we mentioned are tune-up fights. Eddie could out-wrestle him and outbox him potentially. I think Kevin Lee can definitely do that. I think his wrestling pedigree can outwork and out-wrestle and win a decision against Nate Diaz easily. And then you have the McGregor fight. I think McGregor could potentially be like a kryptonite to Nate Diaz's style, and vice versa, the way they mesh. None of those fights are easy comeback fights off of a year-long layoff.
Well, whichever the two of the paths that Nate Diaz takes, if those are the only two opponents available, he has a fight in his hands with both of these guys. So I don't know about the wrestling part. I know that jiu-jitsu that this guy Nate has, I think will overcome Eddie Alvarez's aggressive wrestling style. I just think that Nate Diaz is just too good on the floor. Maybe if he gets him tired, maybe he'll have a chance. But I'm worried more about Kevin Lee. Not to say not Eddie Alvarez. He always pops up, an upset. He's good at being the underdog and really, really pulling through. So I can never count him out.
Agreed. And I think also that that Eddie Alvarez presents, in terms of grappling, his idea of positioning, being in the right position, working to position, maybe not submissions, but working for a position, has always been very excellent. Mr. Smack Your Lips over there, do me.
Sorry.
And I think that's going to give him issues, just like any sort of wrestler has given Nate Diaz issues. Though Eddie Alvarez is the smaller guy, maybe he is susceptible to the boxing game. Maybe he can get sucked into a war. While Kevin Lee, I think, a little more fundamental in his approach to a game plan and executing a game plan.
Well, you know what? You mentioned a good point, Matt. Let's talk about their boxing, man, because Eddie Alvarez has some good boxing. Nate, they'll start getting into a slugfest.
If those two would just had boxing gloves, I would pay $70 to see that. Just being honest, just being a very biased fan of the sport. If Nate Diaz and Eddie Alvarez just had boxing gloves and went 12 rounds, I would pay $70 to see that. 100%. Those are two of the best technical boxers in MMA right now. Both of them have extraordinary body work in terms of their body punching ability and combinations that gets overlooked.
Matt, I gotta go on the record. I think Nate will demolish him. I'm sorry. I keep going against Eddie Alvarez. I find myself keep going against.
If it's a pure boxing matchup, I think Nate Diaz does beat him, of course. I think that's how he does beat him.
What?
In the complete MMA game, Eddie Alvarez is probably the favorite against Nate Diaz.
Really?
Oh, of course.
Why is that? Why?
I mean, all you would need to do is look at the Anthony Pettis fight with Eddie Alvarez. Like, you see how he can just take a striker who has really great jiu-jitsu game and submission game.
He did.
And just outwork him, out-hustle him, and win a decision.
Well, that's what he does.
This is a 5-round fight. I may change my mind. I'll be honest. But in a 3-round fight, Eddie's the clear favorite against Nate Diaz. So is Kevin Lee. And so is Conor McGregor. Again, I don't think any of those fights are 3-round fights. Or they definitely should not be 3-round fights. Those all should be main events.